Delighted today to be joined by Ivan Matthews, Head of APAC Analysis at Vortexa, Osama Rizvi, Energy and Economic Analyst at Primary Vision, and Omar Al-Ubaidli, Director of Research at the Bahrain Center for Strategic International and Energy Studies. Thanks so much, gentlemen, for joining us today on our 999th podcast of this series, which we launched a few years ago. So great to have you all. Tomorrow is the big 1,000 number, ending February, almost ending the first quarter already of this year. So let's get cracking. Omar, let me start with you and have a catch up with you for us on the sort of geopolitical atmosphere, if you like, now 2 months, 1 month into Trump and 2 months into the new year. From a regional Middle East perspective, would you say that we are looking for a bit more predictability as we move forward? If you put all the chess pieces together, Iran sanctions, Gaza, obviously crisis, and how Trump is playing all those pieces. Do we have clarity going forward, do you think?
Well, first of all, congratulations on reaching 999.
Thank you.
And I'm afraid we don't have clarity. The two you zeroed in on the two big question marks, which are what is the US's position stance going to be regarding Iran? In particular, I don't think sanctions are anything that particularly concerns the market because Iran has got so much experience dealing with sanctions now, and they've got China and Russia helping them evade Turkey and so on. So that's not really an issue. But the question mark is the saber rattling coming from Israel regarding Iran in particular. Is it going to attack nuclear installations in Iran? And is the US going to be, my understanding is militarily it would have to be part of such an operation in order for it to be successful. So that's the first question mark, and we have no new information regarding that. Both sides have sort of been talking about flirting somewhat about a deal, but it's clear that neither side is particularly interested in making the concessions that would be necessary for a deal. And then the other issue is the conflict in Gaza. So we had the ceasefire, which is still holding. I believe we had another exchange yesterday night, and I believe that now paves the way for round 2 of negotiations. The only thing we've had is a somewhat bizarre video posted by Trump on his Truth social net yesterday, describing some sort of depicting some sort of strange future Gaza. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it. It had some very.
I did see that, and I was wondering whether it's. I mean, I know it's been posted on his thing, but is it real? I mean, not real, but obviously it's a designed video. But I mean, has it been verified? Is it actually being posted on his Truth social?
To be honest, I mean, either way,
but that seems a little bit extreme.
It doesn't really matter because I think whether it has or hasn't, it doesn't constitute a particularly constructive or credible step regarding the future of Gaza, nor has anything tangible been proposed. And I think everyone's really focusing on how much pressure Trump is going to put on Saudi Arabia to try and secure a normalization. And thus far, the language from Saudi Arabia has been very clear, very swift, totally unequivocal. So basically, we're exactly the same level of uncertainty we were, a month or 2 ago. And the only thing that we can say has moved positively is that the ceasefire and the hostage exchanges have progressed, relatively smoothly. And hopefully, that cessation of hostilities will continue. But everything's very fragile. And I think it really goes down to the fact that the Trump administration's foreign policy apparatus is currently preoccupied with Ukraine and longer term with Indo-Pacific. So the bandwidth at the moment is just not being allocated to dealing with issues in the Middle East.
Yeah, and I mean, his bandwidth is being spread across so many fronts, isn't it? I mean, we can't keep up with the headlines, let alone execution. But thanks for that, Omar. Ivan, let me go to you. Welcome to the podcast. We've got a few headlines on our bulletin today. And let's talk a bit about, OPEC, but in terms of the volumes expected on the market. We are possibly going to see a bit more oil coming from OPEC Plus in April, albeit a small amount. But of course, the demand-supply equation, is changing as we speak. One is Chinese demand, obviously, that falls into that. And as we are approaching the end of a travel season in China, end of Q1, can the market this year pin any better hope on Chinese imports? They haven't been too strong to start the year.
Yeah, and Chinese imports haven't been too strong at the start of the year. And in January, I mean, they were lower in January compared to December, and that was due to several factors. I mean, apart from weak Chinese demand, there was also the OPEC sanctions that were imposed on 10th of January. So that caused supply disruptions and reduced the inflows mainly of Russian and some Iranian crude into China. And in February month to date, what we are seeing from the seaborne crude imports is that there's been an increase in the crude imports. That's due to several factors. Yeah, I mean, now China is the major off-taker of the Cosmino crude from Russia Far East, and that is now being done using non-sanctioned vessels. Then we are seeing some some terminals within Shandong and outside Shandong that is more friendly towards sanctioned vessels discharge, and also Iranian crude that's coming in via STS also. So overall, the implied refinery runs for China have increased in February month to date, but it's overall still lower than 2024. And for the rest of this year, we expect Chinese demand to be at more similar levels to 2024. I mean, we're still seeing this trend of the diesel demand moving from the trucks to the LNG trucks. And property sector, the recovery is still not as fast as what is expected to be. And of course, it remains to see whether diesel use for industrial demand will recover, as given all the uncertainty that was mentioned, like the tariffs and everything. While the tariffs on Mexico and Canada has been pushed back by another month now, the latest is 2nd April, but we never know how the situation can change. That could put pressure on diesel demand. And I mean, gasoline,
okay. Thanks, Ivan.
Yeah.
Well, I'll come back to you. Thank you. So, I mean, indications from China, I suppose steady, but certainly not looking any more positive and perhaps a bit more negative than this time last year. I think the market perhaps is beginning to settle into that expectation. Osama, welcome and good morning again. I know you're not with us for more than about 20 minutes this morning, so we'll make the most of having you for the first half of the show. I want to sort of highlight a couple of headlines on our bulletin today, just in the context, obviously, of Pakistan's complete reliance, obviously, on energy imports, despite having oil reserves also for exploration. And one of those headlines is how Pakistan recently, last week, offered new blocks to foreign investors. No shortage of offerings there for oil and gas exploration. What kind of response do you expect the country to get, given its financial situation as well, and perhaps people looking for a bit of security in investing in the country?
Well, thank you so much for having me at this special episode. I believe we have been here before. Pakistan's a few months ago, we had even more significant oil and gas discovery in Pakistan. And my point of view was the same. Pakistan, like other global South countries, because it's not only about Pakistan, there is a characteristic set of issues that the countries in the global South are facing lately because of the international vicissitudes of prices and policies. So Pakistan tends to face a lot of issues in terms of its economic stability, in terms of the finance, in terms of the business environment per se, like the ease of doing business, like how many days or months and probably years will it take to get these leases and these permits across, So it's all a bureaucratic mess. There are lots of hurdles in it, and it's so much so even in terms of even in terms of the very reserves that have been found recently by Murree Petroleum. I'm not really hopeful because first, they're quite insignificant. For instance, 12.9 million standard cubic feet per day of gas flow is only like 0.5% of an increase in when we compare with the annual production of Pakistan, which is 27.7 billion cubic meter. Oil reserves we have used about 80% of our oil reserves until 2022. And as far as my knowledge is concerned, we have not had a significant uptick in proven reserves after that. The cost continues to increase, 6 to 7 years for these energy to get back to the market. $5 billion of investment is required in terms of refinery and other infrastructure. So there are lots of moving pieces. I think, yeah, time will tell, but we have to fix a lot of things to get a really meaningful response from international community.
Okay, thanks, Osama. Omar, let's go back to talk about sort of international diplomacy, and you mentioned that Trump has been, at least in the last couple of weeks, focused on the Russia angle, Russia-Ukraine angle. Let's talk a bit about that, because I know that's not your area of specialty, but Zelensky is about to meet Trump in the coming days to supposedly sign this minerals deal in exchange for, as far as we know, not guaranteed future security from the US. So is this just more sort of Trump bullying and Ukraine has no choice? Or what do you think is going on behind the scenes there?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the choice that Ukraine has is capitulation or accept this. They seem, as far as what's been released unofficially, to have negotiated a much better deal than the one that was presented allegedly to Zelensky last week, which was, something akin to a sort of 18th century Dutch East India Company or something along those lines. But it's still, I mean, from the perspective of Ukraine, although it gives them a far better economic angle than was previously prompted, my understanding is the deal does not contain any commitment from the US to protect Ukrainian security. But to be honest, I don't even think that would have made such a difference anyway, because the US already has a commitment to protect Ukrainian security from 1993 when it surrendered its nuclear weapons. And that's not been very effective thus far. The UK is also party to that. I believe it's a trilateral agreement. So it may be the case that dropping that security guarantee is just a case of, confirming there's no point including something that is incredible anyway. In the near term, it gives Ukraine the ability to continue receiving arms and fighting. But in the longer term, the situation is very bleak. And it's quite clear from the US that it's telegraphing to Ukraine and to the rest of the world its distinct lack of appetite when it comes to providing military support for these kind of activities. Really, it's just you can call it. You can think of it as a sort of a side economics deal.
Okay. More to be seen, maybe to come. Okay, thanks, Omar. Ivan, back to you. Let's talk a bit about shipping and tankers movements and what they're indicating about energy markets. You've got another headline today which says tankers pinning hopes on, more OPEC oil, floating around in the next couple of months. Well, do you think that will really make any difference to demand for tankers, or is that sort of sector kind of immune to that and has settled into a new pattern of expectation? What's the outlook for tanker rates as we go forward the next month or two?
For the next month or two, the tanker rates, it could be capped. I mean, this is assuming that the sanctions that Trump has delayed it will not be brought forward and anything. Overall, the demand for tankers is not expected to increase in the next 1 to 2 months. As I mentioned, China's runs has implied demand has recovered month on month in February, but it's not expected to last or even go and see any further upside because Chinese demand is expected to remain muted. Rest of Southeast Asia, we're also not expected to see higher demand for crude oil. Refinery runs overall in the Asia region remaining pressured due to reasons like refinery closures, unplanned outages, higher carbon taxes in some countries. The only spot where we could see a bit of upside to crude imports and hence tanker rates would be in India. I think for whole of Asia, India is expected to be the growth story in terms of the crude oil imports. That's mainly due to refining capacities that are coming up for this year, such as the HPCL, Vizag refinery expansion, the Balmer refinery. So that would lead to further upside to India's crude imports. And some of these barrels could be sourced, incremental barrels could be sourced from the Middle East. I mean, Russia will still remain the dominant supplier, but I think it's for incremental barrels that would likely come from the Middle East due to the proximity and also the qualities of it, like the medium heavy sours for India's robust residue desulfurization and upgrade facilities.
Okay, thanks, Ivan. Osama, back to you, and let's stick to the theme of the health of the Pakistani economy and give us an update on IMF prospects going forward. Obviously, a few developments last year took their time. What's the prospect going forward, and appetite from the IMF to keep lending and I suppose helping Pakistan get back on its feet?
Well, interestingly, this is Pakistan's, I believe, 25th IMF program. And while we have not been able to resolve what I call the structural issues that actually needs to be worked upon, and we're just doing what is called the symptom management, this time things look a little different. Why do I say that? Because recently IMF's team has arrived in Pakistan, and now they're also concerned regarding the corruption and other malpractices in the governance of the country, and they have asked things to change in certain departments of the government, and because of that. There is a whole array of reforms being proposed, from civil services examinations to energy sector to the industry. So that gives me a little bit hope, because these are the actual issues that we need to work upon in order to put ourselves on the path toward sustainable progress, because we have had our ups and downs, 6% economic growth to 0.0% economic growth. So this time it's different. As far as the inflation figures and trade deficit and other macroeconomic indicators are concerned, because of the uncertainty in the global environment, the macro environment, as we were just speaking about, I believe Pakistan will continue to face lots of challenges. IMF says the same thing. Our inflation will remain sticky and higher than the target, at least for this year. Financing in terms of trade deficit will remain high. We don't know what Trump will do next, and that might cause another oil price shock, which eventually will prove really bad for Pakistan's current account deficit, which has already widened. So I believe those are the challenges on the macroeconomic front. But in terms of IMF and our corrective path, I think we're getting there.
Okay, I mean, Trump could cause an oil price shock, but that's obviously against exactly what he's attending to do, which is he wants lower oil prices. Of course, there's many contradictory policies out there. Osama, I'm going to come back to you before hopefully you leave us, just to talk about the TAPI pipeline, because that is another bulletin on our headline I'd like to get your views on. Omar, in terms of, let's talk about Trump, because there's nothing else to talk about these days. But again, his strategy, his sanctions, tariff strategy, firing all cylinders, obviously to get responses, whether it's from the EU or China or anyone else. We're seeing the kind of a consistency there now. And I suppose things are settling down a bit, in that, he's puts everything out there and he's waiting for responses to see what he gets. One is the Iranian, maximum pressure, which, is happening slowly but surely. But what is his real intention with Iran, apart from, you'd say he's dealt with the proxy problem for now in the Gulf and in the Middle East? What about the nuclear question? Because that is really what he has promised to guarantee Israel, hasn't he? To get Iran to disarm its nuclear capacity, whatever that might be. Do you think that he will succeed in that?
So first of all, I mean, I don't think Donald Trump is a particularly long-term strategic thinker when it comes to US foreign policy. I don't think, if you look at his first term, and even that at the moment, everything seems to revolve around, quick gains, very sort of myopic framework. So I don't expect that there's particularly sophisticated thinking behind anything that he's doing. He would like Iran to not have nuclear weapons. However, it is clear that no US administration has a good way of stopping Iran from getting nuclear weapons. And he is one of the biggest reasons for losing one of the limited means they had, which is negotiating, Iran not enriching uranium, because he withdrew from the deal and is basically breaking every deal with everyone. So has, shattered US credibility on the foreign policy front. And so as a consequence, really, they've painted themselves into a corner, US and Israel, because all they've got left is threatening force. And what they don't realize is that through their actions, they're making it more and more palatable to Iran to get the nuclear weapon, because it seems to be the only way to maintain sovereignty. And what's going on in Ukraine is a very clear indication of that. So I think what you're basically, there's a mixture of incoherence, lack of clarity in thinking, and essentially not really caring that much about the issue, that are together creating an unclear policy towards Iran, and ultimately one that will not deliver what the US is ostensibly seeking. But I don't think it will make much of a difference in the long run, because the US really isn't that bothered.
Yeah. I mean, well, US isn't, but its ally Israel is, isn't it? And I'm not sure how they'll use that card either.
Yes, yeah,
There's
Israel,
our
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's and the US is behind Israel. There's no doubt about that, at least for the time being. There's the survey question. A new US sanctions on Iranian oil will resolve OPEC's plus dilemma on easing cuts in April. I'm going to probably go to Ivan maybe for a comment on that in terms of market dynamics. But Osama, before we let you go, so will US sanction Iran resolve OPEC's plus dilemma, meaning can they or can they not release more oil in April? Agree or disagree? Osama, just quickly before you go, the TAPI pipeline that is, is a perennial sort of debate on, will it get funded and built, etc. The headline on the bulletin today says that India and Pakistan must support this. And of course, there's the whole political issues of why they haven't in the past. Any hope for that? Because that could really be a big resolve for Pakistan, especially on the gas front.
We need to realize that there is a very significant diplomatic dimension to this project, as it's always the case. So, two very important actors, Pakistan and India, they are not really in good terms lately. Plus, India's stake, you have to compare what's in it for India and how important it is for Pakistan. So, India has recently built a lot of LNG capacity, and they have lots of other options to pursue oil and gas transit. In terms of Pakistan really needs it, but India is not really interested. And if India doesn't join, Pakistan will have to face additional fiscal burden, which can be like 500 million to 600 million, something to that tune of annual transit fee, and increased gas prices. And Pakistan, as we've just discussed very clearly, cannot afford such a fiscal burden on it. It's already ailing economy. So I think we need, and Afghanistan recently has also, there's also some issues with Afghanistan when it comes to Pakistan. It is also getting closer to India. So this whole geopolitical diplomatic dimension makes the prospects of this pipeline a little bit, difficult. It has been in the previous few years as well, but unfortunately and realistically, I don't see any positive development in the near future.
Okay, thanks very much, Osama. Ivan, let's talk a bit about market balances, supply, demand. We talked about China, obviously, how that plays an equation. But we are looking again at an oversupply scenario this year at the moment, and a lot of non-OPEC supply coming in to cover any demand growth that we're going to see. Now, the prospect of having 1 million barrels of Iranian oil off the market in the near future because of US secondary sanctions is possible. Would that resolve, do you think, OPEC Plus's dilemma? It gives them a nice little window to increase volumes without sort of harming the stability and price in the market. Would that be, do you think, a short-term resolution? Do you think it's going to happen?
I don't think any new sanctions on Iranian oil is going to help in OPEC Plus dilemma, because the key driver, I would say, for the intake of Iranian oil and hence prices would be China. So it's really dependent on whether China will continue to take Iranian oil regardless of the sanctions. And it seems to me that will likely be the case. We have seen China being the major off-taker of Iranian oil ever since sanctions were imposed many years ago, done through many ways, through STS, off Lingi, for instance, or even with the OFAC sanctions, they're discharging Iranian crude to non-Shandong port group terminals, and then it's then transferred in country to the teapot refineries in Shandong. So there will be ways for China to kind of skirt the issue to work around the issue if there are fresh sanctions. And if China continues to take Iranian oil, they're not going to pull barrels from, let's say, from OPEC Plus, from the Middle East, for instance. And so that is unlikely to have any major impact to the prices and help resolve OPEC Plus dilemma. Of course, for the first 1 to 2 or even 3 months, we might see a bump in prices, and that because of these supply disruptions, like what we saw for the OPEC sanctions. But after about let's say 2 months or so, I believe things will start to stabilize. That's what
Okay. All right, thanks, Ivan. Omar, I mean, talking about Iranian oil, but Iranian proxies also in the region, of course, all quiet on that front the last 2-3 months, for the obvious reasons. But the market is still, you know, a little bit wary, isn't it, on tenterhooks? I mean, anything can happen. You know, we were just talking about Iran. Iran's been pretty quiet itself in terms of any statements in the last couple of months. But is that just a silent sort of, in terms of sort of transit, Red Sea, Bab el-Mandab threats, could that resurface, do you think, or have we put that to bed?
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with your characterization. Perhaps most of these proxies are quiet, but the Houthis are still very active, and I've not seen any renunciation of them of their attacks or of the expression of cessation, permanent cessation of attacks on shipping in Bab el-Mandab. And I think the level of expenditure on maintaining security in those waterways remains huge, as also the traffic is still around 30% of what it was. So that situation is far from resolved. Right. Yes, maybe there's a decrease in the frequency of daily attacks as the ceasefire holds, ostensibly in accordance with the Houthis tying their attacks to the Gaza conflict. But it remains fragile, and the world is trying to live in a setup which doesn't involve having to go through the Red Sea. But in all situations, you know, this is not the first time Iran has suffered reverses and had to lick its wounds. It would be very naive to think that it isn't working out alternative strategies. I'm sure you remember in 2019 when Qasem Soleimani was assassinated by the US in the wake of the attacks on the pipelines. And I think it's safe to say that although he was considered to be a mastermind of the proxy network, it seems to have had absolutely no effect in the long run on Iran's capabilities. Probably the only significant reverse that's happened now is the change in the government in Syria. But even there, my understanding is that Iran has reached out to Turkey to facilitate the shipment of its weapons to other countries in the region. And so, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And then also the Iranians are very resourceful. So we can call this as a calm before a storm.
Okay, Omar, keep staying with you. Sorry, just to get your half penny's worth on US-Saudi relations as well at the moment in the context of everything that's happening. I mean, obviously, Trump saying he wants lower oil prices, Saudi leading OPEC, plus obviously wanting to maintain a certain level of that and not really wanting to be dictated to. And you just mentioned, the Houthis and how, a few years ago, we do remember very clearly how US did not come to Saudi's rescue when we had one or two attacks on their oil facilities. So the future of the US-Saudi sort of strategic relationship, is it taking a different shape, would you say, going forward? Or are we not really expecting, any significant changes in terms of the guarantee of US security for Saudi?
So I think it's not specific to Saudi Arabia. I think what we're seeing is that the US at the bilateral level with every country in the world, whether it's erstwhile allies like Canada or ones further away like Korea, Japan, the US is not interested at the moment in having anything beyond a transactional economic relationship. And it doesn't want to be tied into, committed in terms of protecting the security of any country, anywhere in the world, apart from the mainland US. That's the clear signal, and it was already coming pretty clearly from the Biden administration, and it's even clearer now under the Trump administration. So within the context of that broader trend, Saudi-US relations are no different. Saudi Arabia yearns for a security guarantee and yearns for nuclear power. It may get those depending on what the US wants to concede on the path to a more stable arrangement in Israel and Palestine. But the what appears to be the intransigent element is the independent sovereign Palestinian state. So really, as a consequence, to answer your question, I think what we're going to see is more or less a status quo, with a bit more emphasis on the economic elements of the relationship between the US and Saudi Arabia, but beyond that, treading water for the next 4 years, because neither side wants to give the other what it really wants.
Okay, well, we wait and see what happens. Thank you so much to Omar and Ivan. There's the answer to our question. Disagree that they will not resolve that, and agreeing with Ivan that really won't make much of a difference. I mean, China obviously continuing to take Iranian oil, but again, the argument's been made that when Trump decides to sort of get back to negotiating on the general tariff trade front with China, that he could possibly convince them to take less Iranian oil, obviously in exchange for concessions on other fronts. There's our halftime talk that's going to be playing in an hour or so. Again, talking, leading with the fact that Trump is willing to and means to impose maximum pressure. We'll see what effect that takes. So well worth a listen there. Robert McNally from Rapidan Energy Group, based in Washington, actually North Carolina. Himself. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Omar and Ivan again, and have a good week ahead, and tune in tomorrow to our 1000th episode. Thank you so much. All the best.